Hey, what's going on? It's the Mex Canadian coming to you guys with a brand new video that's not a recap. Yes, I am doing another tier list video. Finally, I've wanted to do another one of these for a while, and it just hasn't happened yet. So this one is going to be where I think each team in each division is going to finish prior to the 23-24 season. And this is just based off of how how their off season looks, how I feel like they're going to do. Now, to preface this a bit, I do not follow every NHL team. I primarily follow Detroit, Toronto, and Dallas. Those are my three primary teams that I follow because those are my three favorite teams. Yes, I know, Detroit fan of Toronto. I will always be a Detroit fan first and foremost. I do not care. But I only really stick with those teams, so most of my knowledge is just going to be based off of how they did last season, how I think they're going to do this season. I don't know all the guys that each team picked up, so it's just going to be based off of face value and whatnot. I do have general ideas about how everybody did, but like I said, I don't know names about people they picked up and stuff like that, so we're just going to get right into it, starting with the Anaheim Ducks. They're in a pretty tough division, but I think in the end they'll be 7th. Honestly, there's at least one more team in that division that I think is going to outbad them, and we'll get to them later. But I do generally think Anaheim's going to end up 7th. Not like a bad 7th. Realistically, they're going to be. Well, they'll be a bad 7th, actually. They'll be a pretty bad 7th. Yes, they did just lock down Zegras, and then they still have to lock down Drysdale and, a few other guys that they've locked down and brought in. Killorn being out doesn't help them at all, but they have enough talent there to keep them from last place, in my opinion. Next, we got the Arizona Coyotes. This is a bit of a tough one. Honestly, it is. Because the Central Division isn't very strong. Realistically, there's 3, maybe 4 teams in the Central Division that you can see make it the playoffs, and that's a big if on the 4th team. So with Arizona, I'm a bit of a believer in them. I think they're going to finish 6th. Straight up, I think they're going to finish 6th in their division, and that's purely because Logan Cooley looks to be fantastic. Clayton Keller's still going to be fantastic. You've got a lot of young talent there, and if their defense can hold up, which granted I kind of highly doubt, I think Vejmelka will be pretty solid as well. Vejmelka's a really solid goaltender. I don't know what everybody's gripe with him is. He's a really good goaltender. He just hasn't been behind a good defense. So I was a proponent for Detroit trading for Vejmelka. So, but live and learn, I guess. So let's get into a team that's that's a bit more of a difficult one to put, and that's the Boston Bruins. Obviously, last season they had the best NHL season in NHL history with a .823 win percentage, and they won 65 games. That's 15 more than Toronto, which is second place in the Atlantic. But they lost Bergeron, they lost Krejci. They basically have a third line center as their first line center this year, and they didn't have cap space to add anybody. So Boston, it's going to be tough. The good thing for Boston, though, is that, in my opinion, teams like Tampa, Florida, basically Tampa and Florida aren't going to get much better. Either Florida maybe, but Tampa's not going to be better this year. They might just be the mean. They'll probably just be the same Tampa Bay, if not slightly worse. So I think all in all, I think Boston's going to be 3rd. Realistically, they've still got talent. They've got Ullmark and Swayman as well still. So I think Boston will be 3rd. You can make an argument for 4th as well, but I think based off of the progression of the Atlantic Division, I think Boston's 3rd. So, or actually, you know what? No, I'm going to bump them down to 4th. I just thought of something that maybe changed my mind. And yeah, I think 4th in the division, and we'll get to why in a little bit. But after that, the winners of the Metropolitan Division from last year, Carolina. This is a bit of a tough one because of the teams behind them, but I think Carolina's bona fide first place in the division as well. There's another team that you can make a case for as well, but Carolina's just an overall good team, just good, solid goaltending. They've got, superstar goaltending. Maybe not superstar goal scorers. Maybe not any of those. But they got star goal scorers, and they've got a few of them. They've got really good defense. They added Bunting and a few other guys. So I think overall Carolina is the favorite to be first in the Metropolitan, and I still think that that's going to be the case by the end of the year. Chicago's another interesting one, but I think overall, as far as the Central goes, Chicago is going to be last place again. They've got Bedard, they've got Hall. That's about it. I don't think Mrazek's going to be the best person to have in net the entire time, and then they have one or two other goalies that could be backup. So overall, I think Chicago's 100% going to be last place in that division, but they'll be fun to watch with Bedard. And like I said in my recap videos, I will not ever watch a Chicago game with the Chicago announcers. That's just never going to happen again because I cannot handle their incessant clamoring over Connor Bedard. Yes, we know Connor Bedard is very good at the hockey stuff. You don't need to cram it down our throats every 30 fucking seconds. Anyways, on to Colorado. As far as the Central goes, first place. I know that's kind of coming from a Red Wings fan, but out of all the teams, there's only one other team in the Central that I could see giving Colorado a run for their money, and that's just purely because of their goaltending. Colorado has far more enough firepower to thinking about it now, Colorado's second. Now that I think about it and I'm putting more thought into it, I think Colorado's going to be second, and we'll get into why with the team that's coming up soon. But I think Colorado finishes second. Their goaltending's still a big question mark. They've got a solid blue line, and they're kind of deep. They're maybe 3 lines deep, but they're still primarily a top 6 heavy team, which can get you through the regular season, no problem. We see it in Edmonton. We see it in, who else did we see it in last year? We seen it in, Colorado, obviously. Colorado, Edmonton, Toronto. There's a few other teams in there that I can't remember right off the top of my head that got through the regular season with just a strong top 6, and they made it to the playoffs but didn't make it very far. So it's all in it. A lot of these teams that are going to be in this area aren't worried about the regular season. Regular season doesn't matter. They know they're going to make the playoffs, so it's just the playoffs for them. One team, however, that is uncertain is Columbus. Columbus in the minds of everybody, and not for very good reasons this year. Columbus, especially after the whole Babcock thing and whatnot, which everybody warned them about, to be fair. But yeah, they're a bit of a question mark, but I think they're going to be pretty good. And overall, in the Metropolitan's a pretty tough crew. I think 7th. Honestly, the only other team in the Metropolitan that I think could give them a run for their money in 7th is Washington, and that's just because they're a old and falling team. But never bet against Ovechkin. If Backstrom can come back to his form, that's fantastic. And they got decent goaltending, and they're still fairly deep. So I think Columbus overall 7th, but you can make an argument for 6th. Next, Dallas. Dallas is who I'm putting in first. for the Central Division, just because Dallas is a deeper team than Colorado. Ottinger is pretty much a bona fide superstar goaltender in the works. And if guys like Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski can stick to their form from last season, I think it's a no-brainer at this point. So, next, the Detroit Red Wings. This is the one y'all have been waiting for. And honestly, it's a bit tough to say. Sixth. Straight up, I think sixth. Do I think they compete for a wild card spot? Yes, I think they compete for a wild card spot this year, but I don't think they get anywhere. They're definitely not top three. But I can see an argument for fourth and fifth, but there is a very real possibility that Detroit improves. Like, they had 80 points last season. There's a very good possibility that Detroit improves by 10 to 12 points, making it, say Detroit gets 92 points. That was enough for Florida to just barely get into the playoffs next year, and with this year, and with the natural progression of what the Atlantic Division is going to look like. It's going to be very difficult for Detroit to break through that ceiling, because if Buffalo takes that next step, they're going to be, really good. Toronto's likely going to win the division. Spoiler alert. Ottawa can take those next steps, although Ottawa's got a bit of a goal scoring issue now. I mean, they had to bring in both Kubalik and Tarasenko to supplement the goals lost from DeBrincat. And they haven't even signed Shane Pinto yet. So, and they have cap problems as well. So Ottawa's gonna have to make some moves to be able to, get past Detroit. Florida's a bit of a tough one, but I think fifth in the division, battling for a wild card spot as well. That's just solely because of also how the Atlantic is looking to shape up. If Bobrovsky can come back to his playoff and Vezina winning form, then Florida has a shot of being top 3, top 4. But as it stands right now, they're not a very deep team. They're pretty much relying on that top line to do the top 6. They're pretty much in the same boat Colorado is. They've got a very top 6 heavy line setup with mediocre depth. So they're just really hoping that Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight can keep them in games. Next, Edmonton. Edmonton's going to be a tough one as well. But in the grand scheme of things, I think they finished first in the division. Honestly, I do. Yes, I'm betting against the Vegas Golden Knights, the Stanley Cup champions. But the Stanley Cup hangover is real, first of all. And second of all, McDavid and Draisaitl carried that team through the entire season. I cannot see why they can't carry them to the first place. They got a bit deeper. Their only problem is if Campbell and Skinner can keep them alive. That is going to be the biggest problem, is goaltending. So, do with that as you will. Following that, the New York Islanders. Wow, what a team this is. Honestly, as far as the Islanders go, I think they're fifth place. I don't think that... I mean, the Islanders are still a solid team. They will likely make the playoffs again this year. The problem is they won't make it past the first round, and there is also a very real and potential and kind of likely scenario where they don't make the playoffs because of it. Yes, you've got Horvat, you got Barzal, you've got solid players there, and you've got arguably the best goaltender in the world in net for you. But you've got guys who, like, you are literally, if there was a template for how to be the most mediocre and boring team in NHL history, you look at the Islanders. They are just so boring to watch, and it's just not entertaining hockey, and it's just not fun hockey. And that's not why I'm giving them fifth. I just don't think that they're good enough to be any higher than that in their division. But it's on them. Next, LA. A lot of people are taking LA to win the Pacific. Obviously, I'm not. LA's got some solid players, but I think they'll finish third again in their division. When it comes to the Pacific Division, it's a pretty strong division, especially for the West. It's the strongest division in the West realistically. But looking at all of the teams, I can't see them passing Vegas or Edmonton with their current roster, but I also don't see the teams behind them passing them as well. So I think LA's firmly in third. And speaking of firmly in third, the Minnesota Wild. Wow, what a team Minnesota is, eh? Yeah, no, they've got some problems there. A lot of cap issues, obviously, but at the same time, they are the most third place team possible. They're not even close to being good enough to compete with Dallas and Colorado, but they're not nearly as bad enough to compete with teams like Winnipeg and Arizona and whatnot. So they're third place. I think that the gaps between the two sides are fucking pretty big. So, spoiler alert. Montreal is going to be 8th in the Atlantic. That's pretty that's pretty obvious. They're still very much in the rebuild. They're in the young stages of the rebuild too. So, I could see, but Montreal's going to be entertaining to watch this year. That's for sure. They are going to be one of the most entertaining teams to watch. They're going to be there with Anaheim and Chicago with being bad but entertaining to watch. Nashville, it's tough with Nashville because they have Soros in net, which is good enough for almost any team. You just got to put a decent team in front of Soros, and Soros will steal you a lot of games. But I think overall, Nashville finishes 5th just because of Soros. I don't think any other team around them can really make a push against them. At least not make a push against them, but make a push past or with them, I guess, if that makes any sense. Probably not. Anyways, New Jersey, 2nd. I just don't see them being better than Carolina. Yes, I think the Hughes brothers are going to dominate, and you've got Jesper Bratt, you've got Heischer, I think's there. So New Jersey's biggest question is with a lot of teams is goaltending. How will their goaltending hold up? Because we seen last year New Jersey can score, and they can score a lot. They had a plus 65 goals differential, and they still finished 2nd. So it's going to be interesting to see. The top 2 spots are 100% going to be between Carolina and New Jersey. Just because, New York, the Rangers can make it interesting. Because, speaking of the Rangers, obviously, I have them 3rd. I think that the Rangers' biggest question as well is going to be goaltending. They beefed up their top 6 a bit, adding Blake Wheeler and whatnot. They got the kid line of Crater, Hedel, and I don't even know who the 3rd guy was. I cannot remember because I don't care about the Rangers. But, you still got Artemi Panarin, you still got Adam Fox, you've got Zibanejad, you've still got really good players there. So they're going to they're going to go into the playoffs. There's no question about that. The Rangers are going to be a playoff team. It's just a matter of if they can compete in the playoffs. Because last year we seen their stars just fell, and New Jersey ran roughshod over them. So, next, Ottawa. I got Ottawa finishing 7th in the Atlantic. Just because they're likely going to have to make a big move to move Pinto, to keep Pinto in the lineup, or they're going to have to move Pinto. And Pinto was a big player for them last year. So, it's either Ottawa makes a big move to make cap space for Pinto, or you move Pinto. And Ottawa doesn't want to move Pinto because they're already having problems. They're having some problems. They're having some decent problems in the goal scoring department realistically. Not as much as teams, honestly, not as much as teams like Detroit and probably Montreal and some other bottom teams. They're likely not going to have that much trouble. But between their goaltending and their less than average defense, I would say that I don't see them being able to outscore opponents. Just straight up, I don't. So, Philadelphia, they're going to finish last. That's a given as well. They are being set up. They are setting themselves up to win the draft lottery next year, and I can't blame them. They have fully committed to the rebuild, and it's, I mean, what else is there to say? They've committed to the rebuild, and they're going to be very bad. They're going to be a team that sells a lot at the trade deadline, and, I mean, they're basically going to be Chicago 2.0 here in this instance, but without all of the shady shit. So, Pittsburgh is another interesting one because they added Carlson in the offseason, and they've got a few other guys that they added. So they've got some solid depth, and then they've got a lot of hard-hitting players at the top. Obviously, Crosby, Letang, Malkin, and Carlson will be a pretty solid four-horseman group. The problem with that is they're all old. But regardless, I have them finishing fourth. Because nobody else in the Metropolitan screams fourth place to me. Like, Islanders could make it interesting, but Pittsburgh's not going to be good enough to get past Carolina, New Jersey, or New York. And I don't think the Islanders or obviously Philly are going to be anywhere near good enough to get past it is 8th or 7th. So, San Jose, they're finishing last in that division. It's obvious they're going to finish last in that division, in my opinion, because their goalies are their starter goalie is probably going to be Wedgwood. And I will give you $20 Monopoly money if you could tell me who their top pairing defensemen are going to be, and I'll throw in a fucking chocolate chip cookie if you can tell me who their top line's going to be. This could be a historically bad team, especially defensively. Carlson, I've said this in a few other videos, Erik Karlsson was their best defenseman last year, and Erik Karlsson isn't a defenseman. He is a forward posing as a defenseman. There's a reason that he averaged 12 seconds of penalty kill time last year. It's bad. So, who else am I supposed to put there? Next, we got Seattle. Seattle's another interesting one as well, because last year they had a lot of guys that had breakout seasons, and they were able to come at teams in waves, but they lost a few of those guys, like Sprung, who's in Detroit now, who had over 20 goals playing on a third line. So, that's not good. Hopefully, if Beniers takes the necessary steps, that could possibly and will likely supplement a good portion of those goals lost. And maybe Shane Wright shows something. I don't know for a fact, but it's going to be an interesting season for Seattle. And I've got Seattle 5th. It's a bit tough because the teams that I've gotten 4, 5, and 6 are going to be so close to each other. They're going to be fighting for a wild card spot. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets that 4th position. Next, we got St. Louis. I got St. Louis going 6th. That's a bad team as well. Binnington, he's a fucking prick. Don't get me wrong, but he can be an elite level goaltender. He proved that when he drug them to the Stanley Cup in 2019. It's one of those things. A lot of people were saying, I know the hockey guy was saying that he doesn't believe St. Louis is in a full rebuild. Same with Nashville. And I don't think they're in a full rebuild either. They're going to be in a pretty solid retool, but they're not. I don't think they're in a rebuild by any means. And I'm just interested to see what they're going to do. Their top pairing is probably going to be Nick Leddy or some shit like that, which is wild to me. But Tampa Bay, I got 2nd. Just straight up. You can make an argument for 3rd, but I think Tampa Bay at the end of it If you look at the Atlantic Division, it's a strong division, like I said, but there's only one or two other teams that look like they could come in and challenge Tampa Bay for that second spot, and I can't see any of them really doing it. Maybe one, but I've still got Tampa Bay at second. We'll see how well that ages. Speaking of the Atlantic, I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind Toronto is going to get the top. Straight up, like, this might be their year to win the President's Trophy, which is going to be a bit wild because that means they're not winning the Stanley Cup again. I mean, they weren't going to win the Stanley Cup this year anyways, coming from a Toronto fan. But, you know, a man can dream. So, yeah, I think this is Toronto's year to not only win the division, but win the President's Trophy, which will be interesting and fun to watch. But they're going to have to make sure they continue on with postseason success, because odds are Nylander's not going to be here after this year unless they find some way to come up with like 10 mil, because everybody else is getting 10 mil plus. Why can't I, says Nylander. Vancouver Canucks. This is another team that I kind of went back and forth on, but overall I think they're going to finish sixth again in their division. It's going, like I said, three teams I have in fourth, fifth, and sixth are going to be competing against each other. But in the end, Vancouver's a mediocre team. Like, they just are. Demko is an elite level goaltender when he's on his game, but that doesn't mean you're going to go very far, because an elite level goaltender can steal you games. We've seen that. I can't count how many times. That's so many times. But Vancouver continuously buys players to punch above their weight class and ends up getting steamrolled later on. It just happens. So Vancouver is going to be jostling with Seattle and, well, Calgary, to put it frank, for that spot. Next, we got the Vegas Golden Knights. I have them second just because, like I said, the Stanley Cup hangover is real. They did lose a little bit of depth in the offseason, but they're still a juggernaut of a team. They're still going to be heavily favorited to win the Stanley Cup again, or at least one of the heavy favorites to win the Stanley Cup again. So it's going to be back and forth between them and Edmonton, and LA will make it interesting, but I think in the end, Edmonton and Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and all of them will end up pulling ahead just barely. Washington is going to be a bad team. Straight up. I just think they're going to be a bad team. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I realized I had St. Louis in 6th when I meant to put them in 7th, because Arizona's there as well, and you can't have two 6th place teams. So yes, I have Arizona going over St. Louis, and for all of the reasons I listed before remain true. So anyways, Washington, I believe that Washington will finish 6th. Straight up, I think they'll finish 6th. I don't see them finishing anywhere else, because they're not going to be better than New York and Pittsburgh, but they sure as shit ain't going to be worse than Columbus and Philadelphia. They might be worse than Columbus. Honestly, I'll say that right now. They might be worse than Columbus. But don't bet against Ovechkin. Straight up, just can't bet against him. Winnipeg's another interesting one, but I think in the end, Winnipeg is going to go 4th. They still have Morrissey, Connor, and Hellebuck, which is a solid group right there. And I think that if they get the locker room stuff worked out, which I think they may have, I'm not 100% sure on that though, they can still be a solid team competing for a wild card spot. Do they get that wild card spot? Doubt it. But they could still make it interesting. And speaking of interesting, Calgary, 4th. I think Calgary's getting back in the playoffs this year, boys. They're looking like they got their locker room issues figured out, and if they have bounce back seasons from their goaltenders and guys like Huberdeau and whatnot, I think that they will 100% be back in the playoff hunt, but I don't believe they're as good as LA. I don't think so. But I do think that they still make the wild card spot at least for the West. And that obviously just leaves Buffalo. Buffalo I've got finishing third. You can make a compelling argument for why they should finish second, but in the end, I think that they will finish third. Buffalo made incredible strides last year, and they were 1 point away from making the playoffs? Yeah, they were 1 point away from beating Florida for making the playoffs, and Buffalo's got a chip on their shoulder this year. If they continue their momentum from last year, they will likely make the playoffs this year and be third in the division. But that is my list on where I think every team in each division is going to finish. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you guys think will finish top of each division? And, give me your own lists if you want. I don't care. Let me know. I like seeing that stuff. Give me your lists. So, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is, as always, the Mexinadian, and I will talk to you guys later. Adios.